Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Santa Cruz County. My name is Terra Collier-Young. I've been a member here since 1996, and I love being in this pulpit. This pulpit has taught me so much, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share what the gift that has come my way back to you, back to this congregation. Generally, our minister, the Reverend Russ Mate, is here, and he takes a few days off because that is a wise thing for a very busy minister to do. So I was invited to speak with you today as we honor this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. Part of being a Unitarian Universalist is that we have a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And we also, within our principles and our sources, we strive towards acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. And this, along with our first principle and the inherent worth and dignity of all people, will be the container, amongst the container that we will be working with this morning. As for guests among us, we're glad you're here. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful, beautiful winter day. And if you feel comfortable and willing to do so, you're invited to stand and tell us your name and where you're from so that we may be able to greet you and further engage you after the service during our hospitality. Any visitors who'd like to stand as? We good? Well, thank you for carving out this time to join us in respite, also in spiritual comforting, and a little bit of challenge that we're going to offer, because this weekend honoring Martin Luther King Jr. is a significant time for us to have a personal analysis and a relational analysis, as well as really identify ourselves as Unitarian Universalists and what Unitarian Universalism means in this world. So after the service, you are invited to join us, and depending on how cold it is outside or not, we may meet for hospitality outside, or we meet in here. And we have a hospitality ministry in there that is cooking up amazing food. So we nourish the soul, we nourish the heart, and we nourish the belly. It's all so very good. And so I'm going to ask Gail to introduce our morning song. Featuring Curtis Swain on the washboard. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke his heart and freed the wills of many who'd been taught to stay at the back of the bus, at the back of the minds of those whose skin happened to be white. For love of what's right, he gave his life. I'm inspired to be courageous. Dr. Martin Luther King had a lot to teach us. We are learning his lessons constantly. As member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we in this fellowship are in covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. This means all people, including people we do not like. It's easy to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of people we like. And it's easy to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of maybe people that we're a little ambivalent about. But it is really hard for us to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of someone who has done us or our beloveds harm. For people whose actions and behaviors go against our morality and our ethics. So I appreciate that we have spent the last 40 minutes of this service with uplifting songs and an inspiring story and thoughtful sharings and readings, because this is again the container for which to co-create and uphold the challenge of really living into the first principle. So this weekend, as a nation, we celebrate the good Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His legacy, his wisdom, his tenacity, his vision, his dream that he spoke of on the March on Washington in 1963, this is still with us. The civil rights movement was in full swing when he was assassinated, and he was only 39 years old. But his wisdom and his teachings live on. Significant changes came with that civil rights movement, and they were implemented and have been acculturated in the past 50 years, but it's not enough. It's not complete. It's more like a Pax Romana. It's a forced peace. It's a shallow crust that sort of placates things so that the status quo doesn't get questioned. But in the past several decades, the racist behaviors that were once covered up are being exposed. And what our culture has been experiencing is essentially a resurgence of the civil rights movement, one that has uncovered yet another layer of the insidious nature of racism. As a historic footnote, it was during the Reagan administration in 1983 that Martin Luther King Jr. Day was established. And I want to hold this up because this is one of the examples that I will be offering that Martin Luther King Jr. encourages us to consider, and that is to look for the good even in people that we don't agree with. To integrate and make the following suggestions personal, I'm going to ask you to pause for a moment. And this might be a little uncomfortable, but I ask you to bear with me. And think of someone you don't like. And then as I go on with this sermon, I want you to consider this person as I outline the tools that Martin Luther King Jr. suggested that we use. You see, he asked us to love our enemies. And I put that in quotes. Love our enemies. And this is an approach toward affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of all people. To quote Dr. King, over the centuries, many people have argued that loving your enemies is an extremely difficult command. Many would go as far as to say that it just isn't possible to move out into the actual practice of this glorious command, one that is an absolute necessity for our survival as a civilization. Love even for our enemies. And parenthetically, I want to offer that Dr. King uses a lot of dualistic language. Love, hate, good, evil, friend, enemy. And I am opening up those words to a broader, more inclusive relationship. And I think that he would approve of my slight modifications. So as we approach this spiritual practice and develop the tools that Dr. King offers to build the bridge between people who are at odds with each other, he first asks us to take on the task of our own prejudices, to acknowledge that prejudice comes in many ways, shapes, and forms. And here's like a current list of isms. It's not just racism, it's ableism, and ageism, and socioeconomic exclusivism, and privilegeism, and body judgmentism, and other isms. Any number of negative preconceived notions that we have for a person or a circumstance can be described as a prejudice. Even certain vibes that we give or receive from other people can be enough to put our current interaction at odds. And so it is toward this that we are asked to look within ourselves. The concept being that what we don't like in others is oftentimes something we don't like in ourselves. And when we give ourselves the gift of self-examination and introspect, I venture that we just may find places where we've also caused harm and suffering. Oftentimes we judge others because we are judging ourselves. And it seems to be a common human thought to project our wrongdoings, our fears, our misunderstandings, and such onto people. And so it is suggested in this introspection, it is an opportunity to forgive ourselves. The second suggestion offered by Dr. King is to discover the element of good that resides within every person and to look for our common humanity, especially with people who we don't agree with, who we don't like. To quote, "Within the best of us, there is some evil. Within the worst of us, there is some good." Even the tyrant has the potential of altruism, and even the most saintly has the opportunity or possibility to harm. So these two suggestions alone are a tremendous spiritual practice in themselves. The self-reflection of prejudices, past harmful actions that lead to forgiveness of self and others, and actively looking for the redeeming qualities of a person or a situation that we do not like through the lens of our shared humanity, raises the quality of that interaction that can actually foster collaboration for a mutual remedy to a conflict. Both of these greatly inform the third suggestion, and granted, this seems to be counterintuitive. But I want to quote Dr. King again, and he said, "When the opportunity presents itself for you to defeat your enemy, that is the time which you must not do it." That is the meaning of love. In the final analysis, love is not this sentimental something we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is a creative understanding of the goodwill for all. It is the refusal to defeat any individual. When you arise to the level of love, of its great beauty and power, you seek only to defeat evil systems. Individuals who happen to be caught up in that system, you love, but you seek to defeat the system. Wow. I mean, that's asking us to not take an advantage that would create harmful disadvantage. It is asking us to take the higher road, one of mutuality and not of domination. It asks us to not further degrade an already degraded situation. And he goes on to identify that emotion that can exacerbate a conflictive relationship, and that is hate. Love, hate. A powerful and perhaps even a justified emotion, but one more likely to do more harm than good. Years ago, I heard a cliche that really stuck with me, and it says, "Hate is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die." And I'm going to expand on this word hate to include fear, lack of understanding, disdain, enmity. And we really may have full-on justification for feeling this way towards another, but we are advised to take care. A few points of reference that Dr. King offers as an example are: hate distorts the personality. When you begin hating someone, you will begin to do irrational things. You can't see straight when you hate. You can't walk straight or stand upright. Your vision is distorted. And I want to add that disdainful thoughts can blur what is actually happening. It can trigger the thinker's fight, flight, freeze limbic brain and misinform their reactions to what is really happening in the situation. It can make a person cast about for ways and reasons to justify the mighty emotion of righteous indignation. Another term for this is confirmation bias, and the propensity to look for what look for and see only what confirms our beliefs, all but ignoring the evidence that doesn't. And finally, what brings all of these suggestions together, Dr. King suggests that we love our enemy. In the first place, is that within love is the power of redemption. He said, if you hate your enemies, there is no way to redeem and transform them. But if you love your enemies, you will discover that at the very root of love is the power of redemption. What a concept. It is a mighty, tremendous concept. That our love, our humble individual love, could actually redeem a person whose behavior, whose mindset, whose beliefs causes suffering and harm. A love that has such audacity to suggest that when we seek it in another, it could possibly find and ignite that love within them. And this may sound far-reaching, but it is also possible. For instance, have you heard of the stories about the mother or the parent that develops a deep relationship of forgiveness with the guy who's in prison who killed their child? I suggest you YouTube that, because it is amazing. These heartfelt true stories are about the redeeming power of love and examples of restorative justice. Examples of how our responses to harm that has come unto us can be the key to transform the very people that set it out. Our conscious reaction can actually heal what would otherwise be a tremendous, terrible downward spiral of further negative responses. So what is the moral to this story? The first principle really does ask a lot of us. And the wisdom and teachings of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gives us the tools to build the bridge, one that can hold our weight as we navigate the tumultuous times in this current cultural upheaval. We are asked to look within our own experience and see where we are projecting false perceptions onto others, and to find our way clear to forgive ourselves. We are to look for that divine spark within each and every heart and see each other through our own. Dr. King asks us to do no harm. All because words spoken and actions taken through the lens of love is where redemption, change, transformation, and true healing can be found. Remember, too, this is a constant practice. This work is never really finished. Success is not something outside of the work, but within and resides within each quality of moment that we are bringing, we as individuals, and what we are offering. At times we'll do well, other times we'll stumble, maybe we'll become a little complacent or just plain tired of how challenging it is. But please remember that what you do is important. And please return to this good work after you've had a respite. And that this covenant is something that we are constantly changing, constantly developing, sometimes unfathomable, sometimes miraculous, but always a human way of being on earth. So you are invited and encouraged to use these tools to develop your own skills within your own relationships. Have no doubt that it takes courage, which means heart is the source of our emotions, and that we act in accordance with our beliefs. Courage is the quality of mind that enables us to face difficulties, danger, even pain with bravery. Just as the good Reverend Doctor had courage, just as the General Assembly of 1984 and 85 had the courage to vote and make the affirmation and promotion of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle. We do this because we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And to this I say, I'm inspired to be courageous. Want to sing that with me again? I'm inspired to be courageous. Blessed be. Every land, by every tongue. Go in peace and stay for hospitality.